Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Eric and I are presenting yet again this month on a PPC SEO split presentation brought to you by Hannafin and Interpromote, of course. So our topic for this month is going to be based specifically around PPC and SEO goals. And when it comes to those goals, what are some myths behind them? How can we debunk those myths and determine where to truly focus the goals for those respective mediums? So again, this is Kayla Kurtz, and I'm the paid search consultant at Hannafin Marketing. I'm also one of the writers for PPC Hero, and I will kick it over to Eric so he can introduce himself as well.
Hi everybody, my name is Eric Daffhorn. I'm the president at Interpromote. We are thrilled to be presenting our 4th webinar along with Hannafin Marketing today. And in the past we've gone a little technical, gone a little statistical on you, and this time we veer off a little bit more towards the philosophical. So I hope you brought your right brains with you today, and we are happy and eager to get started.
Absolutely. So as in all the previous months, the best way we've found to kick things off is to really run everyone through the list of the main topics we're going to be covering today. So the first thing we're going to do is just go through some really quick definitions of some terms that we're going to use over and over again in today's presentation. So we want to make sure everyone's on the same page from the very beginning. Then we're going to jump into the thorough content. What's the biggest factor when metrics are chosen that aren't necessarily the right metrics for an account? Then we're going to discuss which metrics are most frequently misfocused on. So once you know you're misfocused, that's one thing, but how can you take a step back and look at what you're focusing on and know if there's potential that you're still misfocused? We're also going to talk about how you can properly reset your goals after you've chosen some new metrics to focus on and target the correct metrics. Then we're going to go into, once those metrics are correct, are there some lagging indicators? And this is one of the definitions we're going to go into in just a second. But what are those leading up to metrics that I can track that are also going to contribute to my KPI and get me to my overall goals? Then again, as we do every single month, we'll do a quick wrap up of the 3 or 4 big picture points that we want you to walk away from today's presentation with, and that will be that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So as promised, we definitely wanted to make sure to take a couple of seconds here at the beginning to review 3 terms that you're going to see over and over again consistently through today's webinar, and just to make sure that everyone is on the same page about what those terms mean and what numbers they're referring to. So first up is metrics over there on the right-hand side. These are going to be the various data points in either your PPC or SEO account that you are measuring and tracking to determine performance. So some examples of these are time on site, average cost per click. These are purely just the numbers and what they're labeled as within the interfaces for either medium. The second one is KPI, and KPI, as you know, PPC and SEO clearly love acronyms. KPI actually stands for Key Performance Indicators. So these are those top-level, incredibly important and vital metrics, just as the name kind of explains, that if you can regulate your goals around these KPI, you should hit your top-level overall goal on the account. And then finally, we've got lagging indicators. So these are those metrics in your account that contribute to the overall goal, but they don't necessarily do that directly. So these data points are going to tell you that if you optimize for them and you make those data points better, you can reasonably assume that your KPI for those lagging indicators are going to perform better as well. So they all function together in one big funnel, basically. All of the data is referred to as individual metrics. Your KPI are the top-level metrics you really want to focus on, and then there are lagging indicator metrics that contribute to those KPI and drive you to your overall account goals. All right, Eric, your turn.
Yeah, and when Kayla talks about lagging indicators, I'm really happy she uses this topic as a focal point of today's presentation, and it got me to thinking about a post I read about a month ago from Seth Godin, and I don't read him all the time, but this one was particularly relevant, I thought, when he talks about false proxies. And you can read the quote there, but it's just sometimes so tempting and so easy in web marketing to focus on something that's not exactly what we need to focus on. one of my favorite examples of that is the BMI, the body mass index. Now, if you know me, you know I don't have a svelte supermodel physique, at least anymore. I tend to go there to the doctor and they say, well, you know, when you look at my body mass index, the indicator, you know, the explanation column says, put down the nachos, okay? So the temptation is, oh my gosh, I got to get this BMI down, okay? When really what we should be saying is, hey, you know, let's get healthy. Let's focus on health, because you can dehydrate yourself, you can starve yourself, and there's going to be all sorts of problems that arise from your goal of lowering the BMI, and it's not going to contribute at all towards the actual health of the body. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about where to focus. Are these metrics that we're talking about, are they causal, or are they correlative? Are they really tied to the good work you're doing, or do they lag, like Kayla said, and show up behind? Are they an effect of what we're doing well or poorly? So that's what we're really going to talk about today, where to shift your focus and how to determine what to focus on. So what contributes to us choosing poorly when it comes to metrics? Well, a lot of it is hype. We set goals improperly because of a lot of factors, including, you know, the articles we read, our own vanity, the misconceptions that we have about what's important, and a lot of times too at the agency level, clients will come to us and say, okay, I need 40,000 visits next month, or I need to rank number 1 or number 2 for this phrase. Now here's a little story about a client that we do SEO for, Hannafin does PPC for, and we're just in the exploratory phase of this, and one of their goals was, okay, here's 3 phrases, we have to improve our ranking for these terms. Okay, so in the exploratory phase, what we did is we pulled 60 days of metrics data, and we found out, you know, they already ranked number 5, let's say, for one of these terms. They want to go above the fold. And we looked at conversions, and they're measuring leads based on phone calls or a filled out form. They already have some traffic for one of these terms, and it did not provide one single lead in that 60-day period. They got about close to 100 visits on that one core term that they want to improve rankings for. So right now we're in the formulation phase of figuring out how to explain, look, you want this, and what we do might end up increasing the rank, but let's really consider these goals, because if we take this data set of the traffic that you have already, it's not doing what I think you're anticipating it's going to do. So as agencies or as web marketers, we have to be able to have the data to push back and say, listen, we think there might be a smarter alternative to these trophy metrics that we're being asked to pursue right now. So that is what we're going to talk about today, how to improve communication and how to come in there with the data that it takes to prove your case.
Absolutely. So with that said, let's really jump into, you know, where those misfocused metrics come from for both PPC and SEO. As Eric was, you know, just presenting in terms of where the focus comes from, I feel like it's what I really see the most in terms of misfocused and PPC, where those lagging indicators are brought to the table as overhead goals. So it happens quite often where, you know, I'll get on a prospective sales call and I'm speaking with a higher level marketing team person who's not been, you know, directly managing the account themselves, but there's been an account manager who's recently left, you know, potentially unexpectedly, and you know, this C-level marketing person is kind of scrambling to make sure that they have understood where this whole project has been going, you know, the whole time. And it's certainly not their fault that these lagging indicators are what they've latched onto in the conversations they've been having previously. But again, as Eric mentioned, we have to do the due diligence as web marketers, particularly agency web marketers, to very politely re-educate the situation to make sure that 6 months from now, we're not sitting in a boat where the client is coming back to us and saying, you know, why did you allow us to stay focused on the wrong metrics, because now we're not hitting our very top level goals, and paid search or SEO is about to be swept out from underneath. So typically speaking, I see a lot of focus coming in from accounts that we're bringing to the agency atmosphere that have been functioning mostly in-house, where there's just a breakdown in communication that, yes, these particular lagging indicators are important, but they're not the ultimate goal. So speaking in a little bit more particulars, the three that I see a lot of focus on the paid search side, that these conversations typically start here, is click-through rate, average position, and quality scores. So these numbers, because they're kind of simple, right? They're easier to manipulate, they're easier to understand, because there's pretty direct math and observations that can be made from them. So, you know, the assumption comes in that increasing click-through rate must be good, because that means you're getting more clicks, and highest positions are best because you're above the competition, and quality scores absolutely have to be higher than a 7 or you're not doing anything worthwhile in the account. You know, truth be known, none of that is necessarily true. It's certainly not true across multiple verticals, and I would even say that it's not true across different accounts in the same vertical. You know, in some situations, you may see a decline in click-through rate, but your top-level goal indicator is moving in the right direction. That's the glory and the pain of what we do as web marketers. It doesn't always make perfect sense, but most of the time it does. So those three metrics, I have a lot of conversations around the three of them. I always make sure to stress that these are important numbers. These are data points you want to be tracking and looking at, but these are going to be those lower level lagging indicators that ultimately aren't directly coming out in your revenue, leads, or traffic. All right. Eric, what about you?
You know, this is sort of same stuff, different day when it comes to looking at these particular issues from the SEO perspective. We have so much hype around the things that I bulleted out here. Rankings. I need to rank #1 for this. I got to rank #2 for this. We got to be above the fold for this. And you know, it's easy to understand the confusion because those are often stepping stones to achieving the actual goals that you want to within your business. But they're, you know, just as often as not, they're a poor use of focus. Inbound links is another one, and if you've been on these webinars before, I think I might just complain about this every single time, Kayla, so feel free to shut me down. But, you know, we will go into a sales meeting, and the potential client will flat out tell us, they come to us and the first thing they say is, I need links. And you know, right away, that to me is a bad sign because they're so focused on this metric. And we've lost so much business to someone who eventually comes back and they say, well, you know what, this other firm, they promised us we're going to get 200 links a month, and you didn't promise us any certain amount. And I say, well, okay, I cannot and I will not even try to match that, because if you are focused on a numerical outcome of things like links every month, your agency is going to do whatever it takes to make that quota, and that's just such a poor use of time. So I don't want to get too much into the link development philosophy, but that's something in our industry that's really, really focused on a lot and shouldn't be. Another one is PageRank, and that's dying out a little bit. 5 years ago or so, that was just such a sought-after trophy metric. You know, Google put it out there, and it's easy to see why it's important to some people. It's tangible. It shows up on a green bar on your toolbar. It can increase if you do certain things, and now why wouldn't you want to do that? But what people don't realize is, you know, the things that eventually drive traffic to your site and drive conversions might have some of the lowest page rank imaginable. It has a lot to do with the relevance of the page, and page rank is just sort of a false idol when it comes to relevance. It's just one of hundreds of metrics that go into that. And finally, I'm going to dip a little bit into social, just because I think it's really relevant for this, because the social media crowd is similarly getting swept away in terms like engagement. Well, I've got to engage. I have to be on the same level with my clients, and that's a laudable thought, okay? But again, is that the goal, or is that a stepping stone to the goal. Okay, so all of these things, rankings, inbound links, page rank, and engagement, are lagging indicators, because if you're doing the right thing, these things are going to increase. But it doesn't mean that doing these things is the goal in and of itself. So they're tools and tactics, they are not goals. And we're going to start talking about how to find the actual goals. Moving back over to Kayla.
Awesome. So when it comes to, resetting goals upon the ultimate realization that, those goals have been misset in the first place, focus has been on the wrong metrics, I always encourage the entire account team. And when I say account team, I mean on the client side and the account managers, within the agency, or if it is an in-house situation, the top level, C-level executives and those who are down in the trenches on the marketing team manning the actual accounts. The entire account team needs to get together and truly go back to the drawing board. And from there, you start back at the beginning, which is truly the end game. What is that maximum top goal of this entire project and account? So if you're focused on leads, right, or if it's revenue, if it's traffic and branding, those segments have direct KPI that contribute most specifically to those goals, and they're not necessarily the same across all three. So there are going to be, some KPI that are necessary across no matter what vertical or account type you're working on. However, there is going to be some finer intricacies, and you need to take a much more thorough step back to make sure the KPIs you've chosen are truly those key performance indicators and not, ill-focused, as we've been talking about. So, for the example I always use is this quality score thing. It's easy to assume and to reasonably understand that quality score is important for any account at all, period. That should be a focus metric. And I can tell you directly from experience here at Hannafin that that's not always the case. We've done some really thorough case studies about if you put the same amount of work or the same type of work into quality score improvement in a lead generation account as you do an e-commerce account, what are the results? What do you end up getting out of all of that work? And what we've seen is that more often than not, there is a much greater increase in performance for e-commerce accounts with only focusing on quality score in one particular segment of time. If you replicate that same kind of work in a lead generation account, you don't see as much increase in performance either on just the quality score metric itself or in the top level KPI at the very end game. So it's not duplicated, across different accounts. It's not duplicated across verticals. And there are areas where a metric may be important across any kind of account, but it's not the most important. So in addition to going back to the drawing board and truly just determining, what is the ultimate goal? Have we set that correctly from day one? I also really encourage, account teams to set a range of goals as opposed to one very strict number. The reason for this is because you're going to have seasonality during certain times of the year where you need, maybe your lead volume, is going to be lower because the interest in your particular vertical isn't as high. You don't want to maintain the same, lead volume goals that you have for the summer months that are typically very high volume for you, because it's going to be nearly impossible to hit that numbers in the off-season months. The worst thing you can do to yourself is set a goal there's no way you can hit. It's not going to keep you focused on, what's ultimately most important, which is continuing to drive the account. So setting a range allows you to, as you work through the account year over year and month over month, understand that there's going to be some variance in those numbers. So there's not a dedicated $123.45 CPL that needs to be hit every single month. Obviously, a bit of an abstract example, but you guys know where I'm getting with that. And then the final segment of that restart is to really consider your sales cycles and what data you may not be getting in real time. So, if you've got your new target goal and you've got the ranges set and you know that in the summer months you are more likely to make sales immediately, whereas people who are looking at your website in the fall months may be just doing some research to convert that following summer. You need to take that into consideration. Does your product sell that day, or does your product sell a few months from now? You want to keep that in mind when setting those goals and choosing those KPI. Same thing with lagging data. It's similar to that same idea of, does a click today turn into a sale today? Does a click today turn into revenue today, or does it turn into revenue and sales for me much further down the road? Keeping all of that in mind is going to allow you and the client, or you with your internal client, to set the best range of goals for your true KPI to move forward towards the ultimate top level target goal. So I feel like I've said a mouthful already, but once you've gotten that goal, you've gone back to the beginning, you've chosen the top level, you know what it's going to be, you have to peel that back and say, all right, if it's lead volume, what are the next level of metrics, KPI, that are going to directly get me more leads? If it's revenue, what are the KPI that directly relate to revenue? And similar for traffic and branding, what are those KPI that specifically contribute to that number getting better? So for example, I've broken our 3 segments out here because typically speaking in a PPC account, these are the 3 overarching goals that the account is going to be focused on. It's either going to be lead volume, revenue and sales, or traffic and branding. Now there could be some, a hybrid version where the account wants leads as well as revenue and sales. Of course, that means you're going to have separate targets for those 2 segments. However, again, generally speaking, these 3 areas are the main focuses for any individual account. Now, what I've done is basically given you guys what I perceive as an account manager, as someone who's in paid search, managing the accounts. These are what I think are those KPI that contribute the most to those top level goals. So for lead volume, obviously, if you've got a lead volume goal of 100 to 125 leads in a month, whatever your cost per lead for each one of those leads is directly going to contribute to how many more leads you can get that month. Altering and changing that number directly contributes to the lead volume. Clearly, conversions are leads, right? So if conversions are changing, that's something that's going to come out in the wash at the end of the month for your lead volume. Same thing with conversion rate. Those are 2 directly correlated numbers when it comes to lead volume, that if you're seeing those fluctuate down, odds are your lead volume is down for the month as well. Then we'll look at revenue and sales. Truth be known, e-commerce accounts are extremely exciting for me to work on because you can almost see your direct work coming out in sales in real time. It's incredibly beneficial. It gives you the ability to know that you're doing the right things because revenue is going up right after you make a change. However, while conversions and conversion rate are again going to be really top level KPI for revenue and sales, because generally a conversion is counted as a checkout on the site. So if conversions are going down and conversion rate is going down, you're probably not making as much revenue that month. The one that I think is a little more interesting in terms of revenue and sales and necessary to focus on, as opposed to cost per lead, for revenue it's return on ad spend. So how many dollars, or how many portions of a dollar, hopefully, do I have to spend to make $1? That's a really important metric. It's a number that seems basic, so giving it to a client and saying, we made $5 for every $1 we spent in the ad space this month, gets their attention and they understand immediately. Whereas CPA, CPL, even conversions and conversion rate can get a little bit convoluted when you're trying to explain them. So I encourage you, if you're not for some reason focusing on return on ad spend in your revenue accounts, definitely make that switch. It's drawing board time right now. Okay, and then finally, we've got traffic and branding. This one is a little less stressful from my perspective because you're not looking at how much revenue am I driving, how many leads did I send my client's sales team. These situations are more specifically built towards branding. So the KPI that are attributed to traffic and branding accounts, you're actually going to more often see as lagging indicators in lead volume or revenue and sales accounts. So when looking at traffic and branding, click-through rate, which is quite literally just clicks divided by impressions. If your click-through rate is going up, that means that you're bringing in more qualified clicks to the site. Average cost per click. If your cost per click is going up, that means if you've got a set budget, you're going to be able to afford fewer clicks this month if that number is going up, and vice versa. If it's going down, you're going to be able to send potentially more traffic through to the account. And then average position, more often than not, higher positions do tend to equal higher clicks and click-through rate numbers. However, I've definitely seen situations where you know, searchers are just a little bit paranoid, and the assumption is that those first 3 ads can't possibly be right, so they always click on ad 4. I'm admittedly kind of one of those people. So, you know, average position, while it's most usually directly correlated and is a KPI, you could have a potentially much lower goal for that number dependent on your specific account. All right, I'm done word spitting. Eric, it's your turn.
Okay, rant over and new rant beginning. Okay, so once we decided, you know, how are we going to talk about these goals, here's what we see a lot. You know, you need to remember and not be ashamed of the fact that you are running a business. Okay, your job is to further the goals of that business. You know, what we hear a lot of times is, you know, a little bit of insecurity maybe coming out. Well, you know, they have to know the right acronyms, they have to be in the know about the various techniques involved. But really, you know, what agency life and what online marketing life in general is really boiling down to rapidly is the ability to connect the dots between what you are doing and how much you're selling. And people need to stop being ashamed of the fact that they are in this to make money for themselves and for their companies. And they also need to not be insecure about they need to not be insecure about various things that they need to trudge through in order to do that. Okay, so when we talk about this, you know, you can not bluff for long if you have great click-through numbers, and if you have great rankings, and if you have great engagement, if you're not actually making an impact on the bottom line. PPC's probationary period is long over. SEO's is over. Social, I feel like the probationary period is winding down rapidly. You know, social media has been on everybody's mind for pretty steadily for about 5 years now, but if you can't start connecting the dots between what you're doing in that and the amount of goods and services that you are moving out the door, your budget is going to be taken away. So that's what we're all about here, not being ashamed of the fact that we're here to move stuff. And you know, we always hear so often, well, my brand is a story, and I'm a storyteller, and I'm going to communicate that story. That's great. That's not your goal, though. That's how you're going to achieve the goal, ideally, of being able to tie Facebook ads or Google display ads or product listing ads to the bottom line. So don't fool yourself, because nobody's fooled anymore by that. We've got to look exactly at what we're doing and show how it is creating a measurable impact. So I'm going to talk now about the exact same things that Kayla talked about, but within the SEO context. So again, look, you know, you'll recognize a lot of these from the discussion that Kayla gave. Look at your business goals. It's to sell stuff, right? Or it's to get people in the door, or get people to notice your door, or to get people to want the service that you provide, whether or not they already know you provide it. All right? And this might seem really oversimplified, but I think it gets glossed over too much. Look at every single thing that has made a positive impact to that bottom line. And those things that you're responsible for, do more of them. And the things that aren't doing what helps the bottom line, stop doing them. Come up with some very rapid ways to test and determine the efficacy of the various initiatives that you're doing. You know, let's say you get together with your people and say, okay, we'll put some money in this keyword, or we will work on this rank, and we're going to watch it for 90 days or 120 days. If it doesn't do anything, we're done with it. Okay? Don't keep milking these losers along and just keep pulling them and expecting these corpses to come back to life, because chances are they're not going to do that. All right? So trash what doesn't work, do more of what does. And again, this looks familiar because it's the exact same stuff that Kayla talked about. What are the businesses? Chances are, in your business, the goal is lead volume. Okay? Now, again, lead volume is something that you can qualify, you know what a lead is. You know it's these people filling out the form on your site, or it's these people giving a phone call to the number that you have on the call to action page. That doesn't change, okay? So whether they come in off the street and whether they come off a certain keyword, whether it's a a proximity type thing, whatever sort of medium they came in off of, that is a lead. And if you have that defined the way you want to, then it's easy to see whether what you're doing is changing that. Now, when it comes to revenue and sales, again, that is, maybe even should have been top of this list instead of number 2. Calculate the ROI from your SEO efforts. How much of your campaign went toward this certain keyword or these certain pages last month, and did it work? And over the next 6 months, take what it costs and divide that underneath what what the outcome has been. But measure that outcome. Measure the outcome from a certain landing page straight to the funnel and the call to action. And then finally, traffic. Okay, like Kayla said, this one's a little less stressful. If you have a site where they're not actually selling anything, you have a site where really you're just trying to increase mind share, well, that's good. If you're doing some testing to determine whether your product or service is more in the forefront of people's minds after a certain period, then you have justified the various traffic that you've received from your SEO and PPC and social media efforts. But remember, these things are the core goals most likely in your organization. So just remember that when you're pursuing these, that you must use the data that you have to justify them or to prove that what you've done here is actually making an impact on the bottom line.
Great. Okay, so we've absolutely at this point now talked about how to go back and reset goals for both PPC and SEO from the top level, and then also what those KPI metric goals need to be. But we want to go back and make sure that there is still a next layer of data there that we talked a little bit about before, and that's those lagging indicators. You still need to make sure that once you've refined what your top level goal is, be it lead volume, revenue, or traffic and branding, and then you've selected what those individual KPI are that are contributing to that top level metric. There are other metrics down below there that are contributing to those KPI. And it's going to make a reasonable assumption in your brain that if you have those lagging indicators making positive progression, that's leading up to positive progression in your KPI, and then that's dumping out into your top level goal. So you still want to set these up. You want to pick out a few that you definitely need to be tracking, targeting, reporting on, keeping track of, and be sure that just because they're lagging indicators, you're not still giving them some touch and some love throughout the month. So I've done similar to the way I explained what I believe are KPIs for lead volume, revenue, sales, and traffic and branding. I picked out what are some of my favorite and best lagging indicators that lead up to those KPI and overall goals. So for lead volume, click-through rate here I think is certainly important. If clicks are going up or impression, or if you're refining that trash traffic and you're getting rid of wasted impressions, you would hope to see a similar change in your conversion rates. You don't want to be sending a much larger number of people through to the site because that's costing you in the click side if they're not converting. So then looking at if your click-through rate is going down and your conversion rate is going up, there's something intriguing to look at there. If your click-through rate's going up and conversion rate is going down, you need to start looking at once people get to your site, what's driving them back away to keep them from actually going through that conversion process and giving their information to the client. Additionally, average cost per click and average position, I think, could very much so lead to lead volume changes and the KPI that are attached to lead volume. As your cost per click changes, that gives you the ability to either go after more or fewer leads. Same thing with average position. If your average position goes up and you've got to pay more for that click, you're going to have fewer auctions for clicks to go gather and leads to accumulate as well. So monitoring those 3 lagging indicators is going to give you some deeper insight into what your conversion and conversion rate numbers are doing, as well as CPA and CPL. Next, in terms of revenue and sales, I've touched on it briefly before, but quality score for e-commerce accounts is incredibly important. It is, I would not focus too much on it because I think that conversion rate and conversion rate optimization can potentially be a better use of time, and you can see the return on those a little bit faster. However, we've seen it time and time again where a lot of good quality score work comes out in the revenue almost directly. Not a lot of other stuff being played with in the account while we're making these changes specific to quality score, and then we see sales go up. So there is some correlation there. Again, CPA and CPL, this is a KPI for me when it comes to lead volume. I try not to look at CPL too much when it comes to revenue and sales because depending on how broad and how segmented out your account might be, you could have 3 or 4 different products in one campaign, and the CPA is split out among all 4, and they've all 4 got different margins. My OCD loves to take that account and split it up so that each campaign does truly get its own CPA and CPL goal, but it's not always possible. So monitoring that on a lower level can certainly give you some insight into any revenue or sales issues you're seeing. And then again, average cost per click, because PPC is all about the budget and the money and the dollars that are being spent. So if you're seeing an increase in your cost per click, you had better be able to back that up with an increase in revenue. Or if there's additional competition in the space that's driving those costs per click up, what can you do to bring them back down? So those are the 3 lagging indicators for revenue and sales. And then finally, when it comes to traffic and branding, I kind of made a little bit of a joke here because it's a little bit turned it into an SEO list. So this goes back to our very first original presentation together where PPC cannot always just focus on PPC numbers. We've got to attach things to Google Analytics and start looking at some numbers that are more traditionally tied to SEO efforts. New visitors, for example. If you've got the same traffic month over month in an account, but a higher percentage of that traffic in March is brand new visitors as opposed to returning visitors for the month previous, that's a relationship that you want to look at. Do you consider that a win still because you're expanding into a new area of the marketplace? You're bringing new people into the website that haven't seen it before. So even if traffic is generally speaking staying flat, if they're all new visitors, that's a good thing. Time on site, again, is something very important for traffic and branding purposes. Once you get them to the site, are they sticking around to really check things out? Or are they bouncing back out pretty quickly and going to one of your competitors? Obviously not a goal of yours. So while that does start to look like more of an SEO kind of metric list, I think as lagging indicators when it comes to traffic and branding, those are huge contributors and definitely deserve to be a part of the discussion.
All right, and along the lines of what Kayla did, what I'm going to do is take, just like she did, that list of lagging indicators and sort of put it back in the proper context. Like we have said this whole time, these aren't the goals in and of themselves, but when you're doing the right things, you'll see some change in this. And so what I'm going to talk about is the list of lagging indicators that I gave at the very beginning and talk about what you should be seeing or might possibly be seeing as you go along your way and are doing the right things along the site optimization path. As for rankings, again, I warned against making these arbitrary phrases into trophy metrics or vanity metrics. When it comes to rankings, we try to steer clients away from really core, hardcore devotion to rankings reports, just because, again, like the example we used in the beginning where there were 70 visits from this particular phrase and not one lead generated from it, they don't really mean what you think it means. You might have a guy that you hate that runs a business just like yours and you want to just displace him from the top, and that's not necessarily the right thing to do. What we do see when we optimize content is, and what we measure and like to keep an eye on, is how many different phrases, how many different unique phrases that contain a certain word or words did you bring traffic from? And we call that the keyword net. How big is your keyword net? You know, if your phrase is wall plates, for example, the plates that go over a light switch, you know, did you increase the number of unique phrases that contain wall plate or wall plates last month? Now, one of the interesting things is about that same client I mentioned earlier, about 40% of that client's leads came from queries 4 words or longer. And so that tells us that leads are being generated by people that are not at the very top of the funnel in the case of that 40%, but people who have unique specific questions about certain products, how to operate them, what the intricate machinations are of how they operate, et cetera, et cetera. So just ranking for the top, you know, we should not be putting our focus in maybe a link building campaign for that phrase or really changing navigation to serve that phrase. We need to be publishing more manuals. We need to be publishing FAQs. How do I operate this thing under these circumstances? That's the kind of traffic, or that's the kind of content that's drawing the kind of traffic that's ultimately turning into leads. So that's how we look at rankings and their effect on traffic. Links, again, you know, the misconceptions about links are thorns in our sides. And what we try to tell people when they come saying we need links is, well, maybe you need content worth linking to. In the modern web space, if you have that content and it's crawlable, you're going to get the links. Building links is sort of an artificial maneuver. At best, it supplements good traffic. I mean, we do still request links to specific content manually on a one-by-one basis, but in a greater sense, if you have a smart social program, if you have a PPC program that's pushing out your content, you're going to get the links naturally. The focus should be on the content. So that's where our consideration of links comes in. If you're doing the right thing, you're going to see increasing links, but simply increasing links is not necessarily doing the right thing. Now, engagement, again, going back into social for a little bit. Again, engagement's fine. It's probably doing what you want it to do, but you have to prove that. And when we say that, follow the traffic. How many converters are you getting from your social media channels? The attribution modeling that Kayla spent a lot of time talking about in last month's webinar is critical here. You know, did the conversions that you got, did maybe a third of them start off by coming over to your site from the Facebook page? Well, if that's the case, then your engagement is working. But again, prove it. Don't just assume that engagement equals sales, okay? The numbers, the platforms, the data is there now to really connect the dots. And the agencies and the web marketers that are connecting the dots are the ones that that keep work, that keep their jobs, that keep their contracts. And it's, you know, it's not simple to do, but the philosophy is as simple as that. Our social media director was at SMX this week, and the URL at the bottom is a link to her deck about engagement and how engagement is killing your social media goals and endeavors. So it was fairly brash presentation. I think it raised a lot of eyebrows, but she really covered some good ground about how engagement isn't the goal; it's just a tactic. So grab that URL. This webinar will be posted, so you don't feel like you have to copy it down right now. But it's on SlideShare. It's a good read. So that's how we look at lagging indicators. And again, these are the effects of good web marketing. These in and of themselves are not necessarily good web marketing by themselves.
I think that's a really great way to wrap it up, Eric. That drives the point home completely. So, you know, really to wrap up the last 45 minutes of Eric and I basically begging everyone to go back and take a look at their goals and make sure they're the right ones. You know, I think there are 4 really strong points about this particular presentation, and it's the reason why we felt the topic really needed to be focused on this month. Because the truth of it is, it's not abnormal to find an account that's incorrectly focused on the wrong goals, or maybe less than important metrics. They're still crucial, they're vital, but they're not the most important metrics. However, it is abnormal not to realize that those metrics are wrong and do what you can to change course. So understand that even as you are, with a brand or a particular account for an extended period of time, it's easy to stick with the goals you've already got. And once you're blowing them out of the water, continue to make yourself look good, right? Don't go back and reset a new goal. It's the only thing that makes it a bad move if your goals are wrong or you're not focusing correctly is if you don't write that action and go back and reset things. So then once you've had that realization, really shaking things back down to the foundation, get to those goals, get to the overall top level of what you need to be driving with this account, and then map out those metrics that contribute directly to those goals on a KPI level, and then the lagging indicators that support them from underneath as well, to make sure you've got an overall group and set of goals and metrics that achieve those goals for you. All right, that's it. That's it for the content this month. Really quick, I want to make a fast announcement because we are approaching it quicker and quicker every single day. But HeroConf is actually coming up in the next few weeks. Team PPC Hero, Hannafin Marketing. This will be our second annual HeroConf. We're going to be hosting in Austin, Texas. It's 3 days full of 100% PPC all the time. We've got 47 incredible industry speakers. We've got some of the direct guys from Google and Bing coming to talk over PPC with our group. So we're really excited. Intrapromote is sponsoring the event. We're really excited to have them joining us as well. So while it is going to be an all PPC conference, you could chat up the Intrapromote team and talk to them about your SEO while you're there. So if anybody's interested in attending, we have released some fairly steep discounts. So shoot me an email. Go to heroconf.com, contact us that way. We would love to have you join us, and Austin is going to be beautiful next month. All right, let's do some questions.
All right, we had one that is PPC focused, and I know it's PPC focused because most of the acronyms are something I didn't understand. So
Perfect.
The display ads that we see everywhere, the retargeting done along, through Google and through, other ad platforms. What's their role? How does a good retargeting campaign work its way into the goals that you've discussed today? Or how can it?
Yeah, I think that remarketing is it's incredibly important. If your accounts aren't utilizing it at least as a test through Google, I would strongly encourage that to be something you look at, as soon as possible, because at the very simplest of levels, remarketing is taking someone who has already made the choice to check out your brand and reaching back out to them later when they're maybe not expecting it and putting your message back in front of them. It's a little less of a hard sell, is kind of how I put it. But they're familiar enough with your brand that if you've got an additional benefit or a value statement to your brand that you can offer in that moment, if you get them again to click at that point, you have pushed them so much further into your sales funnel than you can possibly realize. So you absolutely want to make sure, and I'm a pretty strict proponent of saying that remarketing gets its own budget. So you don't throw remarketing as a campaign in with everything else you're doing with PPC and just let it siphon off a portion of the budget. You need to directly say, because these people are already in the next step of our sales funnel, we may potentially allow for a higher cost per lead number to come back on those leads, because the opportunity for those to turn into a sale right now is much higher than the initial click from whence they came. So I think that really sitting down to segment out where your remarketing audiences are coming from and allowing potentially larger CPA goals, and allowances for those is going to be important. And then, as with everything else, I mean, if at the end of the day the KPI aren't coming out and that top level revenue isn't coming out, it doesn't matter all day long if your click-through rate on a remarketing campaign is 30%. That's fantastic. What's the conversion rate? So I think remarketing it's definitely one of those you've got to split it out. What's most important about what it's doing, and not just assume that it's going to produce revenue, because it may not be.
Very interesting. You heard it here first. Kayla recommends giving remarketing its own disciplinary silo. So there you have that.
Yes.
One more about keyword not provided. So that's definitely in the organic SEO camp. How does the growth of keyword not provided affect the measurement of goals and the lagging indicators that you talked about? That's a really good question. We talked a little bit about keyword not provided last time, and basically, if you're not familiar with that, in a lot of Google's organic searches now, they're not passing along the referring phrase. So a lot of times your top organic referring keyword, if you look in your own analytics, will be, in parentheses, not provided. In other words, you don't know what that keyword was.